The fastest way to get a medical benefit from cannabis is by inhaling it. Traditionally, people have smoked it. More recently, people are vaping it. There are differences between the two, so let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Dr. David. So, amongst the many hats that I wear, I am a medical cannabis certifying physician. I first was allowed to start doing this at the state level. The first law for CBD passed in 2014, so a few months after that is when I was allowed to start doing CBD authorizations for children as well as adults, although the over-the-counter CBD products were available before that. In 2016, that's when THC laws were passed. So by 2017, I was authorizing patients to be able to be getting THC in the various forms. It was about another year before actual flower, the buds of the flower, the weed itself, if you want to go use that term. But at the medical dispensaries, it's referred to as flower. That's the term we're going to use. And that's when we were allowed to start getting that. It took about a year before that was actually introduced into the dispensaries. Now, the main advantage of inhaling it, as I said, is the rapid onset. You know, the effect is going to be felt in the order of minutes. When people take it by mouth, it could be in 30 minutes, it could be 90 minutes, it could be different from time to time. But for most people, when they inhale, up, you don't put typically whole pieces in there because it needs to burn evenly. Okay. Some people will do it because they either like the taste, they just like the experience of it. Some people say, hey, it's the closest thing to nature. I want to be as close to nature with using the product that the earth has given us. And that's a reason why people do that. And also just, I mentioned the taste, but the taste of the original plant. Okay, it's going to be truest to that. Now, there are disadvantages to when people smoking it. Number one, there's a strong odor to it. It's not discreet, but also it could bother other people around. I know plenty of people who are like, that's a very malodorous smell to them, and they can be bothered by it. I know people who could even get nauseated by being around the smell of it. And when a person smokes it, it's put off into the air. That's going to have the most smell to it. Also, of course, smoking it can be problematic for those with respiratory issues. Now, it also can bring harmful byproducts into the lungs, similar to the way that cigarettes with tobacco is. Now, of course, people usually don't smoke it nearly the amount that they would smoking a cigarette. So that may not be as much of a problem because it's a frequent. And when people talk about cigarette smoking, how many packs per day, right? People aren't smoking the equivalent of a pack of medical cannabis. Also, people in the use of water pipes, besides the fact that it can cool the smoke down, it does, and people will I can put ice in a water pipe as well to even cool it further. The water itself does act as a partial filter. Not as many of the plant-based products itself, besides just the inhaled particle, would get into the body, get into the lungs. So there can be some, but it's not a complete filtration process. So there is still obviously smoke getting into the lungs. Now let's talk about vaporizing. Okay, people typically call it vaping. Okay, in this, nothing is being burned. Okay, so you'll see at the medical cannabis dispensaries all different types of cartridges, different shapes, etc. In addition to it, but people can vape actually in different ways. So first of all, dry herb vaping. People can take the flower, grind it up, similar to like they would for smoking, but they have these vaporization products, vaporizers, that it heats the temperature of the flower up to the point where the medicinal benefits that can be gained from the THC, the CBD, the terpenes are released into the air, but at a temperature lower than the plant actually burns at. So there's vapors, and it could look like smoke, but it's not smoke. There's no particulate matter being released into a dry herb vaporizing product. Some of these products, most of these vaporizers can also be set to different temperatures. So if a person wants, it can be maybe easier on their, the thermal heat can still be problematic, but they can set it to a lower temperature in order to not have as much heat. Usually it takes more inhalations to extract the active ingredients from it. And when people make it at a higher temperature, and also lower temperatures, it keeps the taste more as a side effect, as a side. Okay, now let's talk about oil vaping. That's when people are typically, you hear people taking cartridges, etc. So typically there's like 0.5 gram or 1 gram cartridges. They screw onto a battery. Those batteries are also sold at the medical dispensaries. And the difference is, again, there's no byproduct. There's no plant material there whatsoever. Now, the way that obviously you're taking a plant and turning it into an oil, and there is differences in that process. So there could be solvents that are used, carbon dioxide that are used, that are made to separate all of the different ingredients from the different terpenes, the different cannabinoids, and then they remove the plant material, and then they reconstitute it into the oil. And but a lot of times those aren't exactly true to that necessary to that strain. Sometimes they even just take all the terpenes and cannabinoids, and the dispensaries, their scientists will even make their own products up that's not necessary from a specific strain. Okay. Now, thankfully, unlike when a person gets an illegal product, or even vaping, when people do nicotine products, where we've heard about problems with the flavorings and stuff like that. That's not a problem if you're using natural terpenes. Okay. Now, also, when a person is getting an illegal product, okay, one of the major concerns is, of course, the impurity that could be in there. And one of the concerns, and you may have remembered from a few years back, there was this major problem called vape lung injury. And it turned out that these illegal products, that they were being filled partially, cut, if you will, with a vitamin A acetate that had the same consistency and it looked like it, but it burned people's lungs. That would never be a problem with a medical product, because first of all, that's a dilution. They would find that out instantaneously. If it says that there's 70% THC and it's 30%, they know something's up automatically. But also they're testing for the vitamin E acetate as well. So bad stuff, you do not want to be inhaling vitamin E acetate. Okay. Now, in addition to those different types of chemical processes to separate it out, in my opinion, the best medical product to use is what's called live rosin. And that's because you can imagine almost like a giant panini press, where it's just heat and pressure. So, and imagine like maybe like a giant press with some cheesecloth underneath it. So the flour is put onto there. The heat kind of presses it out, and then the pressure makes the oil all ooze out, and then the oil is able to drip through that cheesecloth like filter, keeping the plant material above. So not only is there's no plant products in it, like fibrous products in there, there's also no chemicals being used to make live rosin. And most dispensaries now have this in a vaporized cartridge, like similar to the other oils. Now, in addition to that, one of the advantages of using a vaporized oil, again, if you're taking a standard inhalation, you should be getting a standardized dose. Okay. Granted, from cartridge to cartridge, one may have different percentages, but at least for that cartridge, if you take a 3-second inhalation, you're getting the same amount every time. In addition to that, when it's done as an oil, it's put into this battery that has the heating element. Now, the heating element that's within the bottom of the cartridge, if a person gets to the bottom of it and they're down to the last couple drops, they may get a burnt type of taste. That means the coils themselves are being burned. At that point, one should get rid of their medical cannabis product. They should not keep using it. That can be bringing chemicals from the coil itself. Now, in addition to that, recognizing that could be wild range of strength. So even there could be cartridges that can have 25%, 75%, 90%. So you always need to make sure at the medical cannabis dispensaries that you see what percentage that you're getting, because obviously a 75% product will be 3 times as strong as a 25% product for the same length of inhalation. So that's something, each product, even within the same strain, one batch may come out 83% versus 75%. So from batch to batch, there could be some differences. Okay. Now, also, another way that people inhale it that you may have heard of, what's called dabs. And this is something that's more kind of like a waxy to, sometimes it's more solid, called Shatter, where a piece of it is then taken and put into a device that is inhaled, but it's not in a cartridge. And waxes, shatter, butter, batter, resins, hashish, these are all forms of these concentrates that are in dabs. And they're almost all very high potency, at least 70% of THC. So, if you don't, I've seen dispensaries say, somebody unknowledgeable telling them, oh, just get this, it's the most cost effective, which it may be, but you can't get a tiny dose out of a dab. They talk about a grain of rice. You need a pinhead size that in order to get this, to get a small dose. And that's just not that. Of course, you can use different temperature settings. And of course, if the temperature is lower, then there's less irritation. And those types of devices usually can be altered as well. Now, Also, with flower, and again, coming back between the differences, rarely will you see more than 30% as THC. So again, just recognizing that there could be very difference in that concentration. Okay, but so also you may it may take more to inhale in the vape form, recognizing that because when a person smokes it and it's high heat, it's all getting into their body. So it may be that even though it's 25% THC, it's burned up in like 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Whereas when especially if it's done in a pipe or a water pipe, but when a person inhales it in a dry herb vaping, it typically takes a lot longer to extract that. So if time is of the essence, then the other forms would be better. But if you're wanting to use a dry herb vaporization to get the benefits of the flower, it usually takes more time to extract the active ingredients. Okay. Now, of course, if a person is having a side effect that they do not like from using any form of cannabis, they should notify their physician right away. A knowledgeable medical cannabis physician can make a recommendation to hopefully alleviate that problem. Okay. So, in summary, yes, we can use medical cannabis, inhaling it safely and effectively. Okay. And in my opinion, dry herb vaping, as well as live rosin use, especially live rosin in the cartridges, those are the best forms. So now you have some more information. Have a great day.